Hi, I'm Tobi.
And I'm Nick.
And welcome to the Pure Property Podcast with Track Capital, where we talk about all things property and property investment. We give you our industry insight, knowledge and expertise in bite-sized chunks to help you invest intelligently. Today we're trying something a little bit different. We're going to be doing a video, which obviously to change things up a little bit, and you get to see our pretty faces while we're talking and doing the podcast. So if you do want to check out a video version of this, we will be uploading this to the normal channels, YouTube, etc. So feel free to check it out. But if you do prefer not seeing us, as some people might do, you could still carry on listening to the podcast as per usual. So
just quickly on that one then, guys. So as a side note, it's a good point. YouTube, we're trying to be a bit more active on there now. So new developments we try and put up there a bit more on the market data side as well, and then also our podcast as well. So if you haven't already, we're on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook. It's a good place to see updates from us on a daily basis.
Good point. Right, let's crack on. Nick, why don't you introduce what we're going to talk about? Actually, today, why don't we sort of talk about potentially there's a headline which has definitely caught our attention. You probably know a bit more about that because I know you brought it up, Nick, earlier.
Yeah, well, I was just keeping an eye on BBC News earlier today whilst I was in between work in the office. And obviously the government have announced that they're looking to inject more capital into solving the nation's cladding issue. So the figure I'm looking at now on BBC News is 3.5 billion that's been promised to remove unsafe cladding from high-rise buildings, restricted to buildings over 18 metres tall. So, yeah, it's more of a positive and a good sign of the government going a step further and actually taking some decisive action on this. So whilst it doesn't affect most leaseholders out there, there is obviously a big chunk of people that will probably get a lot of relief from that as well. So, yeah, more details to come, the intricacies of it and how it will work exactly. And but as I say, it is good to see the government doing something there and forking out more money.
And you said it's for buildings over a certain height, is that correct?
Yeah, so I think it's 18 metres in England. So, for buildings like sort of substantial buildings, I think the logic behind that is that that's where the biggest risk is, where the experts have identified that needs addressing most quickly, rather than the smaller boutique low-rise schemes. So yeah, anything above that will get looked at, hopefully.
Okay, excellent, interesting stuff. Yeah, well, obviously, any sort of news articles, if there's anything massive, we will keep you up to date with that. And this week, we're going to be talking about, obviously, the purchase process, because last week we went over the costs involved with buying an investment property, mainly tailored to the off-plan purchase, and some of the ongoing costs afterwards. So to tie in with that, this week we're going to be talking about the actual purchase process, which again isn't something maybe that a lot or the majority of our investors do know about, especially if they are a first-time investor. If you've done this once, twice, or three times, you probably will be familiar with this. But if you are kind of new to investing, or you've maybe only invested once and you want to sort of refine the process, because the more you get to know this process, the more efficient it is and the more prepared you can be. This is definitely worth listening to and can be beneficial.
Yeah, absolutely. So, to kick things off then, we're obviously going to go through the entire process from start to finish for a new build / off-plan purchase, but a lot of it is very relevant to everyday purchases on the secondary market, whether that's an apartment or house, etc. So, yeah, worth listening into the key points. But to kick things off, we're focused on the off-plan sector. So picking out your unit would be the first stage. Obviously, we're skipping over the due diligence and the research and the sort of appraisal process because we assume that and we cover that in other episodes. But the first stage would be to pick out your unit then. So what we want to do is make sure we're ideally working with a half-decent broker or advisor who's helping us, who knows the development and will really help us pick out the most attractive and the most desirable units within our budget range. So yeah, it probably is obvious to a lot of people, but it's really, really important not to rush that stage. Pick the right one, make sure we're not near any lifts, stairs, poor views, noisy, maybe larger communal areas within the building, etc., etc. But yeah, first stage, picking out your unit. Once you're completely happy and then you found an apartment that you really, really like, we'll go through the reservation process. Now, typically, this will involve your agent sending you some documentation and then requesting some documentation back. Now, this will be your reservation agreement. So this is just a provisional summary of your purchase, i.e. who's buying it, what they're buying, basic terms and conditions of the reservation fee, and it just summarizes it all nice and neatly for all parties to see. We'll also request your AML documentation. So this is typically ID and proof of address, so passport, driving license, and then we always look for sort of utility bills, bank statements dated within the last 3 months. So you'll do the reservation agreement, you'll provide your AML documentation, and then also your agent's going to ask you for a reservation fee. Now, in most cases, certainly speaking for ourselves, this isn't an additional cost, but it is an upfront payment that you would need to make, typically via bank transfer or credit and debit card, to the agent. Now, you really need to consider that as locking in your unit. So once you've paid that fee, normally the developer will mark it off and the unit's reserved for you for the purpose of the purchase process. So we know we've got at least 28 days from receipt of contracts to finalise and conclude the purchase. So yeah, pick out your unit, tell your agent which one you're after, complete the reservation agreement and AML documentation, transfer your reservation fee, which is typically £2,000 to £5,000, depending on the development. Then you're locked in and you're good to go through the legal purchase process at that stage.
Yeah, and then you will be moving on to the legal process. So once all those steps are done and you've locked in a unit, reservation fee is paid, you will be then instructing solicitors. Now, that may be solicitors that the developer has on a panel because they may know the development, which helps keep it efficient and can help keep costs down, because obviously they won't have to spend as much time if they've already gone through the lease in previous transactions, etc., etc. Or obviously, if you have your own solicitor and feel more comfortable with them, you're absolutely fine to do so as well. So once they're instructed, the process would be for them to send out the initial paperwork. And again, they will be wanting documents such as proof of ID, proof of address. Again, they will be doing their own checks, ID checks, anti-money laundering checks. They will have a questionnaire for yourself and for the purchase. They'll need proof of funds to make sure that the money is sitting in an account and is readily available. Again, they need to see that's been sitting there for 3 months, all to do with anti-money laundering reasons, and they may need to see where those funds have come from, etc., etc. Then you will look to maybe pay for searches if that's an additional cost or whatever disbursements they may be, and they will start the ball rolling there. You will then have the legal pack sent out, and also a contract report as well. That's when you can have a look through the details. You can raise any inquiries or any questions you have with your solicitor. Remember, it's very important you utilize the solicitor at that stage. Any questions you have, that is what they're there for. They are legally trained to advise you and give you advice on this, and they have a duty of care towards you as well. It's best not to leave any stone unturned at this point. Any questions whatsoever, just fire that at your solicitor. That is what they're there for, and that is what they're paying, that you are paying them for. Now, remember, they will make inquiries on your behalf as well. So when they go through the lease and documents, they will make inquiries on your behalf to the selling side or the developer. But you also are able to raise your own inquiries if you do have any questions. And if the solicitor isn't able to answer them themselves to you, if it's a simple question, they will then go to the seller's side and ask them directly for them to answer. That's the main bulk of it, and that's the main part that takes time. So once all that's done, everything's been happy, everything's come back, you're happy, inquiries have been answered, and the solicitor is happy, you then go to the stage of exchange. So you'll sign and send back your contracts, you'll send your funds in for exchange. So again, depending on the development or the purchase, so for example, that might be 10% on exchange, that might be 20%, 30%, just depends on the developer or the selling side. You will then put those monies or send those monies to your solicitor, who will hold that for you. Once that's in and the contracts are in, The solicitor then will look to you for authority to exchange. So they'll give you a call and say, look, we just need your authority to exchange. Is that okay? And once that you give the go ahead, you exchange contracts, and that is locked in. So you are legally obliged to buy that property at the price that you have agreed, and the seller is legally obliged to sell that to you at the price agreed. If any party pulls out, then obviously there can be costs and implications involved, especially for the buying side. If you do pull out, then you forfeit that deposit monies that you have put forward to your solicitors. Very rare that happens, but just bear that in mind. And once you then exchange contracts, depending on the purchase, you then look to complete. So if the development or the property is all ready, then you'll be completing maybe in a week's time or simultaneously. Again, just depends. Or if it is being built, you will find out the construction updates along the way, and you will be kept in the loop via the agent or the broker or whoever you were purchasing through. And at the point of completion, you will then pay the remaining balance that is left. So, for example, if you've put a 30% deposit down, then you have to pay the remaining 70% balance left.
Good stuff. So, yep, covered off a big chunk of the process there, right through from reservation up until completion. So, just a couple of points I'd add there. Firstly, when you're reviewing and you're picking out your unit, part of the due diligence process should be to have a look at the draft contracts. So, yes, these will be templates and they'll just be a rough outline, but that might save you a bit of time. If it's just very, very basic inquiries, you might want to have a bit of digging and do a bit of research on that before you commit. So draft contracts is one. I think a really good point, and one of the most important, again, is that the solicitor's acting on your behalf. So they are, even if they're a panelled solicitor, if they've worked in a development or they've been recommended by the developer, and they're at the end of the day, they're a regulated independent company. So they will be, completely impartial in their advice and make sure that they're giving you the correct formal information. So, yeah, even if you are using a panelled one, they'll definitely be on hand to make sure that you're covered off. And yeah, I think that's it for the legal purchase process. I think the other thing to say as well is, in terms of timeframes, it's often down to the investor and the solicitor in terms of response times. So ultimately, you can be as quick or as slow as you want to be. If you do really want to get a transaction through quickly and you complete all the AML checks and you're pushing and working with your agent and sales progressor to get it over the line, it can be done very, very quickly. So I think there is a bit of a misconception that it automatically takes months to complete a purchase. That's not always the case. But yeah, I think that's enough on the legal process. Any questions or extra information anyone needs on that, feel free to give us a shout, info@trackcapital.co.uk, and we can go over that with you. So, yeah, as Toby mentioned, you get to completion. If that's a complete project, great, you crack on with that. If it's off plan, you've got the construction updates there. So you should be getting them from the developer directly, and hopefully your agent will remain in touch with you through the purchase process. Again, I know our guys will, monthly updates, offered site visits, etc., etc. Also just any general inquiries. Now, once that new build development gets to completion, obviously you're going to go through that handover process. So this is the case of you basically becoming the owner of the property practically, i.e. you can go there in real life and have a look around, collect the keys, look at any snagging issues and talk them through with the developer and make sure you're 100% happy with everything. Or you can use a third party, like a lot of our developments will go up there and meet a lot of the owners and be there for the handover. Or you can pay someone to do it independently if you want a really, really thorough, dedicated job. But yes, so that will be when you get to completion. Obviously, you can use the management company as well, just to go and pick up if it's a straightforward case there. So yeah, handover on completion. And then once you're happy with everything and it's signed off, we're over to the lettings and management process.
Yes, lettings and management process. So you will be looking, I assume, in most cases, especially if you're looking hands off, to instruct a letting agent, unless, of course, you're letting and managing yourselves. But that's a whole different story, which we won't go into, as it's probably not something we recommend. And you will then instruct the managing agents, the letting company. That could be one that is already familiar with the development. Again, in the case of majority of developments we deal with, you will have a managing agent slash letting agent already lined up that knows the development, knows the area, has probably done some of the research in terms of the rental prices, etc. And they will be there for you to use and utilize if you do wish. That said, you're not forced to. You can find your own managing agent. You might know somebody locally, or you may want to shop around, which is absolutely fine. Once you then employ them, they will then start the ball rolling to get you a tenant. They will advertise it on the major portals, Rightmove, Zoopla, etc., to their database. They will then find a tenant, reference the tenant, go through all the processes to make sure that they are right and vetted properly. And then, obviously, once you have agreed and accepted an offer from the tenant, you then start with the contracts and getting that signed, so they then become officially your tenant and have a moving date set in place. That's a very shortened version of it. And once they're in, then you start making your money and collecting your income from your investment.
Yeah. So in terms of the lettings and management thing, as sort of Toby stressed, there's a lot of different bits that they would do, and we've just covered off the basics today. But just to stress, if you are using a management company, I've said this before, but it's really, really important to make sure you're working with a reliable one who's using decent, honest, and sensible contractors. If they're going in and seeing your tenants, etc., we want to keep them happy. So yeah, we want to make sure we've got someone who's on the ground, knows the area, reliable, responsive, and does the job well. So it's not always best going for the cheapest one in that case.
Definitely. And I think what I've learned in the past, again, similar to what we mentioned before with the solicitors, they're there for a reason. Use them, utilize them, ask them what's going to get me the best price, what's going to rent it out quickly, because they will give you an honest answer. You might not always like the answer they're going to give you, but they're there to do a job and get the property rented out. If it doesn't rent out, then they don't make money and they don't provide you with the service that you require. With all my investments, that's the first question I ask: what's needed to get this rented out quickly, and what's going to give me the best price? And they will give me the advice. They know the area, they know what tenants are looking for, they know what the tenant demographic is looking for at that moment in time as well, because it can shift, and they will be able to advise you accordingly. So please always ask them the question, take their advice on board and utilize them, because that is what they're there for.
Yeah, and okay, cool. So that's pretty much summarizes the entire process. I did want to make one more point about, as you can see, throughout this process, from picking the unit, from instructing solicitors, to chasing solicitors, to giving construction updates, to doing site visits for the property handover, for introducing letting and management agents, you can see how if you have one point of contact and one quality, reliable agent holding your hand and helping you from start to finish, how much more stress-free and beneficial that can be. I've worked at companies before where it's a case of, you get the transaction over the line and it's done. Whereas if you're actually assisting people through this purchase process, adding value every time throughout, you're going to build up a really good relationship with the buyers, speaking from our side. And then from the investor side, obviously, it's a lot more convenient and a lot more stress-free. So, yeah, it's just a point I wanted to make there is, working with an agent who's not completely salesy, a bit more consultative, in the game for the long run, really, really makes a big difference as well. But, hopefully that gives everyone a summary of the purchase process. So right from picking out your unit, doing your reservation agreement, going through the legal process, and then collecting and handling the handover of the property on completion as well. So that's pretty much summed things up. Anything else to add, Toby, or should we go into what we're looking at next week?
Just quickly on the point, you made it very, very sort of clear there that the process is very long. There's a lot of different parts through the process, well, different people to deal with. And yeah, I just want to reiterate what you said. It's always good to be dealing with a good agent that is there through the whole process. It can take weight off your shoulders. For example, I know how we act. We are there to liaise between all parties as much as required. Some people do like to get on with some of the processes themselves. However, I have a lot of clients that will just say, Toby, do you mind chasing my solicitor for this? They're busy, they're working, they're not available the hours of the day to chase solicitors that sometimes we have the time to do. So we'll chase the solicitors, we'll follow up on the mortgage, we'll get information across to the broker. speak to the managing agent for them. There's all those different processes. When you've got a designated point of contact such as ourselves, it helps massively because you've not got too much information coming from so many different avenues, and it's technically all in one place. So I think you're right there, and it's good to have, no matter how experienced or not experienced you are, to have that is a massive bonus and a benefit to invest efficiently and get the process done efficiently as well.
Yeah, just to cap that off, that's not to say, it's not a sales pitch to say we're the only ones that do it out there. That's general advice for any transaction you're looking at. Get a reliable partner who's on the ground, who's going to help you from start to finish, particularly if you're overseas, and you could keep the conversations to WhatsApp and emails to a minimum to really allow for a hands-off process. So yeah, it's not just us obviously that can help that much. Anyone out there, it's just general advice to make sure you pick someone useful.
That's why some people do employ just property sourcers, just because they haven't got the time. They haven't got necessarily the knowledge to deal with different areas and different markets. So they'll pay someone a fee to do that because, again, it speeds up the process. It's less hassle for themselves. They don't have the time to do with it, and they know they've got a professional looking out for their best interest and picking out investments that they necessarily wouldn't be able to find or have the time to find. So, as you mentioned, that's not just speaking about us. There are specific sources out there that will just find you properties based on specific criteria that you're looking for, and they will charge a fee for that. And exactly what we've just listed, that's the reason they're charging their fee. The same way a solicitor charges a fee. You're paying for their expertise. You're paying for them to get the process done properly, efficiently, and diligently.
Yeah, good stuff. So that's pretty much summarised things for the purchase process.
Yeah, definitely. Well, when you sort of bring us into what we're talking about next week, Nick.
Okay, cool. So yeah, next week we thought it would be good to go over the rental side of things. So obviously we've seen huge fluctuations in 2020, and we're going to continue to see that in 2021. There's been various industry reports showing the performance in various cities at the back end of last year. So what we're going to do is summarise the rental market conditions. Are things taking longer to let? Are rental rates changing? Where are they changing? And just how the rental market in itself is performing. So hopefully that will help some of our potential and existing landlords as well.
Yeah, I think it's always good and always in the forefront that we're talking about property prices. That's always sort of grabbing the headlines more. We don't, and again ourselves, we don't always necessarily go into detail on what the rental market is doing, because again, as an investor, that is a very important thing. Yes, you want to know what your property or your asset price is doing, of course, and what potentially it may do. But for the longest period that you're going to own that property, you're going to be renting it out for the whole time and making that money. So I think it's going to be a good one to go through how we see the current climate within the rental market, and potentially what the future holds for it. Because with everything going on with coronavirus, of course, there's going to be changes. So I'm interested, especially after reading the latest report from Home Track and doing some more digging and having a look around. I've had my sort of theories, as I usually do, recently, and looked into it. But it's going to be good to discuss this and obviously, go over this next week.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a good point you picked up on as well. It's all based on data, right? So we'll go away, get the research, look at the figures, and then we'll put our own spin and our insight into it as well. But yeah, rest assured it's going to be underpinned by the market data.
Definitely. Well, thank you for joining us again this week. And if you join us on video, let us know your feedback and how it is. And if you do want to carry on seeing these faces, yeah, I'm going to have to employ a makeup person, I think. But yeah, so join us next week for that episode, and we look forward to seeing you then. Bye-bye.
Thanks, all. See you later.
Bye.